Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Frankincense. Again, no sponsorships other than Walden Dental and me, your host, David Frank. And let's get into this week's news out of the first week of March of 2025. It's amazing being able to talk about the news now because there's just so much. There's never a dull moment. So we'll do a little recap from last Friday on the big showdown, or maybe another word to say it, a Zelensky shakedown in the Oval Office between President Donald Trump and President Volodymyr Zelensky. It seemed like Zelensky was more interested in continuing to earn money as opposed to trying to find peace. And I'm so thankful that President Trump and Vice President Vance really just kind of brought that out to light in understanding this is not a winnable war, probably for both sides. Russia doesn't really stand a whole lot to gain, and to keep going at this war of attrition for the cost of so many millions of lives already lost in Ukraine, for such limited movement and any type of borders, but then from an American perspective, how much money we're exhausting in this. The concern is, as anyone knows, from an animal that feels cornered, whether that be Ukraine or Russia for that matter, animals and people will start to do things they wouldn't necessarily do. Where I'm going with this is options of the worry about nuclear war. If both sides don't feel like they're really getting anywhere, and more importantly, if Russia feels like NATO and the United States are escalating things to potentially even still consider Ukraine as being an entry to NATO, enough is enough. And the world can't take that chance. We all know that as much as we want to say Putin's a bully, he's tactical, he is strategic, and unfortunately, there's a lot of pride that can get in the way. And I think we saw that very clearly in the Oval Office with Zelensky's temper tantrum. And I understand President Trump right out of the gate admonishing him a little bit of, thanks for dressing up. Now, I'm wearing my show's Sunday best, but every time I'm coming to work, I'm always in a suit and a tie. That's what you do when you want to show not only courtesy, respect, but that you're ready and prepared for the job. President Zelensky was not at war in the Oval Office, and despite his wartime rhetoric, he needed to show some dignity and some grace when negotiating with America, for that matter. So again, kudos to President Trump for actually sticking up and calling it for what it was and telling reporters, telling the press, no, stay here. We might as well air this out for everyone to see, to know what's really going on here, so we can get a keen understanding of what these war parties are really after. Speaking about dignity and grace, let's go right into the joint session of Congress this past Tuesday. Boy, depending on who you talk to, an amazing speech by President Trump, and having almost an 80% approval rating from viewers from CNN, from other sources of more liberal-based conventional media here, traditional media, and just a really sad disappointment in the behavior and decorum of the Democratic Party. I don't know what those ping-pong paddles were going to achieve and aim. I understand they wanted to be steadfast in their silence to be able to approve or applaud anything. So far as to say President Trump had to make multiple statements acknowledging there was nothing he could say, nothing he could do, nothing he could report that would ever give the Democrats a reason to applaud. And frankly, that's sad. I understand that they are representing a certain constituency in their districts, but they're also representing America. And if you really break this down further, it was more of just a tragic embarrassment of what we are showing our young children and our youth about how to appropriately behave. Perfect example, Senator Warren. I used to live in Massachusetts, would rather have been on her cell phone while the President of the United States was addressing a joint session of Congress. There was multiple segments and video clips of her just staring at that cell phone. How are we going to expect our teachers to conduct a classroom with students that would rather be on their cell phone? And now a student could more likely than not use to their defense, well, look, I'm looking at our leadership do that. Why can't I do that? And a teacher, I'm sorry, probably in the grand scheme of things, may rack and stack just a couple degrees lower than the President of the United States and the free world for that matter. Just a shock. Then we get to see Congressman Al Green, yes, of our state of Texas, just go off the rails. Fortunately, with him not being mic'd up, we couldn't hear the disgust and just the diatribes and the idiocy that was spewing from his mouth. And I don't care if you're waving a cane, and if he is disabled, the Americans with Disabilities Act should just be really raking him over the coals or reading him a new one here of why would you represent us in this fashion? It didn't get you anywhere. Them digging their heels in the way that they did just screams, I'm a child, I'm immature, and I am really a sore loser. At the end of the day, regardless of who's in office, we're all still Americans here. And this isn't opportunities to keep taking jabs and cheap shots. Then we really get to see it sickening when they wouldn't even applaud cancer survivor, 13-year-old DJ Daniel. How embarrassing. What are we trying to convey here? The Democratic Party was always about compassion and always putting out a hand for those that are less fortunate, no matter what their circumstances. Let's talk about medical unfortune or lack of fortune. And to sit there and to show that disdain, that just belittlement. I mean, it's just, I can't think of a more appropriate word other than embarrassing. Embarrassing. And then we have TV personalities on MSNBC with Rachel Maddow and Nicole Wallace wanting to throw their anger and, again, their sore loser status insofar as where Nicole Wallace had just been so out of touch. Although she wanted to give optimism and hope for DJ Daniel about surviving cancer, that she's concerned about his career choices, because if he ever became a DC Capitol police officer, he may succumb to suicide on the next January 6th riot. The boy's 13 years old. And if that's your level of this passive-aggressive, cheap shot rooting for our American youth, just please retire. More importantly, I hope your ratings just show that you need to get fired too. Because Joy Reid had it, and you're probably on the chopping block next. Who knows? Maybe they all want to be self-sabotaging to all get fired so that MSNBC doesn't have to report back to their shareholders why their media outlet has fallen apart. Moving along from there, at least President Trump took one more step to support DJ Daniel by inviting him and his family to the Oval Office and really making that young man feel like a truly loved American. We also saw this week Vice President Vance with Secretary Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard down on the border discussing options and how we're going to keep our borders even more safe. Very interesting on the statistics. Back in the Biden administration, we were having over 1,500 border crossings a day. Now it's down to less than 30. And going back to that joint session, President Trump said it wasn't about needing new legislation. It wasn't about needing new regulation. It wasn't about having to allocate more money. Really what it was a change in administration and just a new president. And I'm really happy that that's happening. I'm sure most of you are too. And for those that are not happy, my biggest question is why? There is nothing to say that we are not wanting immigrants to come and migrate. We're actually hearing about the gold card. No, not everyone can afford $5 million. but there are still plenty of opportunities that can be done without excessive expense for those that truly love America and want to call America home, the ample routes for them to become citizens. We could use Congress to help continue to work on, if they ever so choose to do, a reasonable bill to be passed to make immigration to the United States something reasonable and not so convoluted. But you could say the same thing about our tax system. Some reason there's always money to be made in this world of making things unnecessarily complex. So that moving on, other interesting news, especially as we have now identified America will only endorse 2 genders as of Trump's statements in the joint session of Congress. We also have it reinforced that men will no longer participate in women's sports. Again, still can't understand the controversy with that. I understand that there will be certain individuals that may want to identify as a different gender than birth. Nothing wrong with that. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have to impinge or infringe on the competitive rights of those that kept their same gender without having to use performance-enhancing hormones or DNA for that matter. I think it's evidently clear that there is distinct difference. That's why we have 2 sets of divisions with male and female. Maybe we just need to make a trans division. I haven't really heard a realistic argument as far as why we can't. I understand it's just a small proportion, but if those are that emphatic about making equity, well then fine. Let's make an equitable trans division. Riley Gaines will be here in Austin this week to discuss these matters. I'm sure she's much more kind of persuasive, influential in this matter, as she was directly impacted in her swimming national championships against, can't remember the guy or gal's name there from University of Pennsylvania, but you know where I'm going with this. It totally impacted her life. And as me being a lifelong swimmer, I totally get it. You're busting your hump to know you never stood a chance. And I'm glad that she took that calculated risk, and she's taken a lot of heat for this, to consistently stand up against the cultural ebb and flows of what is appropriate and right in our nation's form of sports competition. So good for you, Riley. Keep up that fight. I'll sign off with this. Something a little personal. It's my birthday. So yes, happy birthday to me. And keeping up with not only the MAGA movement, but also the MAHA movement under Secretary Kennedy, it's so important to stay consistently healthy. Today I made a short little video of me at the gym, and my wife Emily came over to record. No, I'm not one of those types, but we had a little fun with pull-ups and being able to count out 21. And if you look at Make America Great Again, you'll see those words add up to 21. I'm 44 today. I had to do 21 pull-ups when I was 22 years old at the Air Force Academy to get an ideal fitness test score. So I'm happy to know, twice as old, and I still got it in me. So leaving it with that, I hope everyone has an incredible weekend. Oh my gosh, I'm a dentist, and I almost forgot. There's been a lot of talk, especially with MAHA and fluoride, and whether or not fluoride is good or bad. Now, that could take me a whole 2-hour episode of talking about fluoride, but let me see if I can give you the Cliff Notes version of this. Fluoride is really good for those that really need it. Fluoridation in our public water was one of the top 7 best public health initiatives that America has ever done. What its intention was is for those that had very limited or no access to care. They were never going to see a dentist. And what fluoride will do is it will actually help strengthen the teeth. If you get into the biochemistry on this, it changes the hydroxyapatite crystals to hydrofluoroapatite crystals, which gives us a better ionic strength bond to help limit bacterial invasion into the enamel and getting into the dentin and then the pulp and giving us a really bad toothache and severe cavity. Through our times and over the years since water fluoridation started immediately after World War II, there has been ample more sources of fluoride. Fluoride in our toothpaste. Then we have prescription fluoride toothpaste. Then we have nursery water with added fluoride. Then we have fluoride tablets. And then we have fluoride rinses. There's a lot of fluoride. Even if you go and drink some of our more popular soft drinks, the water that is used in the soft drinks also has fluoride in it. So where is all this going? The National Toxicology Program put out a report here in 2024 and then got published in January of 2025 discussing fluoride. And they were going through research that was conducted in China and Russia and Brazil and Guatemala and Mexico that showed those individuals who had consumed more than 1.5 milligrams per liter of fluoride, especially as children, there were implications to cognitive defects, neurological defects, and insofar as to say that they were becoming intellectually disabled. Yes, this happens more with children. So what's the big worry? Well, some of these countries were not regulating their fluoridation in their water supply. So as a child, when you're receiving that fluoride and also growing here, there can be impact. Now, calm everybody down. America does not put any more than 0.75 milligrams per liter of fluoride in the water supply. So that's less than half. So the concern is, well, does this really matter for America? And the only thing that I would say to this is that there could be concern if how are we adding up how much fluoride we're having? If we're drinking it in the water, we're having it in the toothpaste, we're having it in other soft drinks, we're having it in other rinses, how much is too much? And the reality is, how would we ever really know in our day in, day out life? Well, let me take you a step back. Why do we need fluoride? Well, to help strengthen the teeth before they're fully mineralized as a child, before they're fully calcified as a child, to limit cavity propagation. But hey, is fluoride the only way to do that? Absolutely not. Let's make better life choices. What I mean by that is sugar. Low dietary pH in our mouth is what causes cavities. When we take accountability for what we're putting in our bodies, whether they be supplements or our food stuffs, the conscious decisions of what we do are going to immediately impact our long-term results, whether they be with teeth or anywhere else in our body. Teeth are an interesting thing. We only are going to get, outside of our baby teeth, which are totally gone by the age of 14, only one shot at this. Teeth do not regenerate. Teeth do not shed off old enamel and regrow new enamel. It is so imperative to keep every ounce of what is naturally you. And it really starts by what you're putting in your mouth. We can't eat a boatload of sugar and then whine and complain, how come I get all these cavities? Nor can we look at high doses or any type of supplementation through fluoride or toothpaste to say, well, that's going to be our cure. Ask your dog how many cavities he or she may have. If they could answer, they'd probably tell you 0. And the reason why is you don't give your dog sugar. Their enamel, their dentin, their pulp is not that far off from our own. So be serious and intentional about what you're doing. Don't just all of a sudden assume everything is bad. Don't assume everything is good. Be mindful. Use your own mind and critical thinking to assess, does this nutrition help or actually harm me? You may find out fluoride, with all of its merits and now all of its controversy, doesn't have to be so dangerous for you. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this week's version of Frankincense. I usually say, live well, take care, and smile, but I'll probably sign off with God bless, and God bless America.